going through my.
Hello, welcome, and thank you all so much for coming. We really appreciate people who have taken their Friday night to learn a little bit more about this COVID-19 and the vaccine. I wanted to thank especially our panelists this evening. We have some wonderful medical experts today who have joined us to share with not only Chicago Children's Choir families, but all communities that we serve and around the city and anywhere, this free open seminar, just so people can ask their questions, learn a little bit more about the vaccination and how to keep themselves, their families, and our communities safe. So I'd love to just go right into introducing our three panelists. We are so fortunate to have Ms. Karina Brown, Dr. Basel Eriksusi, and Dr. Sonia Oyola with us today. I'm going to let them go around and introduce themselves, their role in this fight with COVID, and some of their experience that they have in this fight every day. So, Karina Brown, would you mind starting us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Karina Brown. I am a registered nurse. I'm a nurse manager at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. I work in the general medicine service line, so I actually take care of COVID patients. I have been on the front lines since the pandemic started back in February, March of 2020, and continue to work on and off COVID units and caring for COVID patients. And I have definitely seen the journey of this disease process. And I've been able to celebrate wins with patients, and have also been having to mourn with patients and family members too, because of the devastation of this disease. So I'm happy to be here today.
Thank you so much. Dr. Eriksusi?
Hi, everyone. I'm Basel Eriksusi. I'm a pulmonary and critical care consultant with the Franciscan Physician Network. I'm the medical director of the surgical and medical intensive care unit at Franciscan Health in Dyer. Member of the COVID-19 advisory task force for the Franciscan Alliance Health System. And I had a first row seat fighting against COVID-19 over the last 2 years, treating hospitalized patients with a mild, moderate illness to very severe illness in the intensive care unit. My pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Oyola?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sonia Oyola, and I'm a family medicine physician working at Heartland Health Centers in Rogers Park. It's a federally qualified health center there. And I'm also a faculty member of the University of Chicago, where I teach medical students and fellow faculty. And I have also, since the beginning of this pandemic, been supporting families and individuals that have been affected by this virus. And it's an honor and a pleasure to be here with all of you.
Well, thank you all so much. So I'd love to start right away, and I'll go ahead and ask some questions that I've heard from our families and that just around the community. But throughout this entire session, I hope that anybody who is here with us today will feel free to put in the Q&A on your screen, type in questions. They'll be kept private for only us to see, so you can submit them anonymously or just privately. Nobody will see them but our panelists. And then we'll answer them live for you right here with our medical experts. So please feel free to do that throughout the session. To start, I wanted to jump right into this vaccine. We're all hearing about it. We're all hearing that this is available now to 5 years old and up. Are you all vaccinated? And if so, what made you feel safe enough and feel like that was the right choice to get the vaccine? Ms. Brown?
Yes, I am vaccinated. I was actually very lucky to be one of the first people in my hospital to get vaccinated on the first day that they released it back in December of last year. And I think I was very honored and humbled to be able to be one of the first to be able to be eligible to receive the vaccine. I kind of spoke to it before, but I have seen the devastation of this virus, and I've seen how it has ripped family members away from their loved ones so quickly. And caring for these patients day to day, we haven't been able to allow visitors in the hospital. And so, we've been the ones that have been there to hold their hands and to make sure that they're not alone if they, are not able to make it through this. And I've also seen people who have been able to recover and be well, but they still have some sort of ailment or, health issue after. And so being a Black woman, I'm from the South originally, vaccines have not always been very popular for, my demographic. And there's always been a hesitancy because you feel like you're being part of a project or, it wasn't studied on you. So when the vaccine first was announced, I got excited and then I got nervous immediately, and I had to question why I felt nervous. And I came to terms with the fact that it was because of how I was raised and the culture that I grew up in and the view of vaccines. So I am fortunate enough to be a nurse and to have been educated. So I did what nurses do, and they do research. And so I immediately took to the internet and I looked at research and looked at studies by Black physicians. And I looked at Black physicians who were part of clinical trials. I followed some on Twitter. They were very public about what they were going through and about their experiences. And I really formed an opinion that I felt was right for me as a Black woman. And it was those physicians who, put themselves out there and did the research and did the education and were part of these clinical trials that ultimately led to my decision to get vaccinated, because I felt that it was safe and the right thing to do for me, for my friends, for my grandparents, friends, and my grandparents and my mom and everyone around me that, might not be as healthy as I am, because I want to make sure that I keep myself well. And I have a duty to patients as well, that I don't want to get them sick. So that's kind of my journey. And that's what led me to get vaccinated.
Thanks, and thank you for sharing your personal journey. Dr. Eric Susi, why did you get vaccinated?
All right, I'm vaccinated and boosted, and I think I'm waiting for my second booster when they start applying the second booster. Simply actually because the vaccination proven that it's very effective. We see it. We know that it's providing mortality benefits and also provides what we call disease severity benefit. So if you are vaccinated against COVID-19, and in case you contract the virus, most likely the illness will be mild, and most likely you'll not get hospitalized. What we see from numbers from our ICUs and all the ICUs through the nation, that about the mortality rate is it's 90% unvaccinated. So if you have 20 deaths related to COVID-19, that is about 18 deaths unvaccinated and 2 deaths vaccinated. So sure enough, there is a mortality benefit. Also, in regard to hospitalizations, we see that about roughly 86% of hospitalizations are unvaccinated. And we see way less percentage of the vaccinated. And rarely we see anybody in the hospital if they are boosted. So that's really, it's evidence that the vaccination is effective and providing a lot of benefit in regards of mortality and severity of illness. And when the pandemic, we start getting cases last year, early in 2020, we witnessed a lot of death. And that was heartbreaking. And I think when we start having the vaccinations and we saw the effectiveness of the vaccination with less mortality, that we are really very lucky to have the vaccination around. It's one of the tools that it's preventing our community and our patients. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Oyola, your your answer to the question about vaccination.
Of course, very similar to my colleagues here that have shared their journey and their experience. I also, at the time, did research and looked at the safety of the vaccine and what potential side effects could be coming from the vaccine. And eventually, you know, as Dr. Eric Susie mentioned, was heartened and relieved to see that people were dying less and less hospitalized when they did receive the vaccine. And so it was also, as a family medicine doctor, I have a long history of focusing on prevention and making sure that people are protected against a whole host of different types of viruses. And so we have a long history of flu vaccine and measles, mumps, rubella vaccine and tetanus vaccine and coming in for your diphtheria, getting your hepatitis B shots. And so I certainly didn't consider a vaccine as anything but a safety measure to prevent death and also to prevent the illness from being severe. Muy similar a mis colegas que están aquí, la misma razón en que me vacuné fue porque hice muchos estudios para ver si la vacuna era segura. Y entonces miré para ver cómo esos estudios estaban programados y decidí en ver esos estudios que estaba segura y entonces me vacuné. Y pronto después también miré qué tipos de efectos secundarios iba a tener la vacuna y vi que los efectos secundarios no eran severos. Entonces, pronto después se vio que la tasa de muerte y también hospitalización se había bajado bastantísimo después de las vacunas. Y entonces con esa información me sentí muy asegurada con la vacuna. A la misma vez, como doctora de medicina familiar, he pasado toda mi carrera tratando de prevenir infecciones y enfermedades con vacunas. Entonces, así mismo como uno se pone la vacuna contra la rubela, contra el sarampión, contra la influenza, contra tantas enfermedades, me aseguré y nunca tuve miedo, nunca le tuve miedo a la vacuna, porque eso es una historia tan larga que tenemos de vacunarnos para prevenir muerte y también para prevenir enfermedad severa.
Thank you so much, and thank you for translating to Spanish as well for some of our listeners here. Dr. Oyola, I know you work with children and in family medicine. Would you be able to speak to, is the vaccine safe for children 5 and up, and to talk about any of the risks that maybe we've heard about, something with a heart condition and any of those risks that people might be fearing?
Of course. And my apologies, my dog is right next door to me, and she likes to bark, so my apologies. If she starts to bark, I'll put myself on mute right away. So the vaccine has been studied as vigorously as it's been studied for adults and is found to be safe in children. The FDA approved the vaccine for 16 years and older. It currently has approved an emergency use for 12 to 15-year-olds, and they're currently trying to get FDA approval for 12 to 15-year-olds. And as you saw now more recently, it's even gone ahead and approved for emergency use for 5-year-olds and older. And so the vaccine that's been approved has been the Pfizer for 5 years and older. Moderna has applied also for an approval, but Pfizer is currently the vaccine. And what I have had patients ask me questions about whether this is safe for children, whether it's safe on their hearts, and whether it causes infertility or fertility issues. And to date, the issue with the heart is something called myocarditis. And what that is an inflammation that occurs after you've received the Pfizer vaccine. That tends to happen in 12 to 17-year-old children and teenagers, mainly males, that are pre-adolescent or adolescent, and it's incredibly rare. So it's something on the order of 54 out of every 1 million doses. that is the situation, but that is a potential, but very incredibly rare risk of the vaccine. The other risk is allergy and what's called anaphylaxis, or a very severe allergy, and those are very rare as well. And so, to your question, the vaccine is very safe in children. It's safe and approved for 5 years and older, and that's the Pfizer vaccine. I think I answered all of your questions so far. Okay, y entonces para explicar eso en español, corrientemente la vacuna que es aprobada para los niños, primeramente por el FDA, tiene que ver con niños de 16 años para adelante. También ha sido aprobada para uso emergente para niños entre las edades de 5 años para adelante. Y en esos casos, la vacuna ha sido estudiada así mismo como se ha sido estudiada en adultos, y se ha visto que es muy segura. Los efectos secundarios de la vacuna también son mínimos, que voy a hablar en un momentito. La vacuna, ahorita el riesgo que se ha visto del corazón, sí, mis pacientes me han preguntado de problemas del corazón o problemas de fertilidad, y no se ha visto ninguna evidencia que causa problemas de fertilidad. Del corazón, en raros casos, en 54 casos, en cada 1,000,000 dosis, se ha visto algo que se llama una carditis, una inflamación del corazón. Eso es extremadamente raro. Y en total la vacuna es segura para niños de 5 años para adelante. I wanted to also mention the common side effects in kids. So common side effects for the vaccine are just like the vaccine precautions that we've been advising parents for a long time. So after any vaccine, a child could have a low-grade fever, could have soreness of the arm. Soreness of the arm is the most common side effect after a vaccine. It's rare to have other side effects, but sometimes a headache, feverish, soreness of the arm are the most common. So los efectos secundarios de la vacuna más comunes es el brazo adolorido, fiebre también, o dolor de cabeza, decaído, pero esos efectos secundarios se resuelven dentro de esa semana. But those potential side effects do resolve by 7 days.
Thank you. And one more question just focused on children too. I've heard that this is a disease that affects people that are older, and that was when it all started. That's why 65 and up were the first to get the vaccine. So what's the likelihood that a child really could get this at this point? And what are the risks if they do get it?
So any child is at risk for catching COVID-19. What we have seen since September is a very dramatic rise in the cases of COVID-19 among children. Something on the order of 28 million cases have started since September. And so a large increase of children having to need hospitalization. And the younger that you are and the least mature your immune system is, and the smaller your lung passages are, the little tubules in which the air goes through in your lung passages, if you get a viral infection that can cause inflammation in your lungs, the more likely that you'll have a severe case of COVID-19 as a baby. Now, in general, children do tend to have milder cases, but they also can have very severe outcomes from COVID. One of them called the multi-system inflammatory disorder, and what that is that the infection can cause inflammation in different areas of the body, not just the lungs, but also the heart and also the kidneys and the skin as well. And so it can become a very complex condition if a child, for children. En total, para niños, cualquier niño tiene riesgo a captar el COVID-19. Los niños que son muy bebés, entonces tienen más riesgo a tener infección muy severa porque tienen los pulmones menos desarrollados y también un sistema inmunológico menos desarrollado. Y en esos niños se le puede presentar casos muy severos, necesitar hospitalización. Desde septiembre del año pasado se han visto muchos más casos y tasas de infección entre niños. Unas 28 millones de casos se han visto desde septiembre y se ha visto una tasa de hospitalización muy severa entre los niños también. Los niños en total sí se les desarrolla un caso menos severo, pero sí se puede desarrollar una condición inflamatoria sistémica a donde se puede inflamar todas partes del cuerpo, no solamente los pulmones, pero también el corazón y los riñones y también la piel. Y en esos niños, desafortunadamente, la enfermedad es muy severa. I think I answered your question.
Thank you. We're getting a couple questions from our attendees, and one is, what are the risks of the COVID vaccine compared to the risks of the vaccines children have been receiving since they were babies, which many children already have? Is there any further risk to this vaccine that makes it feel different
May I,
than the measles vaccine or any of those?
so we know, in general, the COVID vaccines, they are safe. People may get side effect similar to other vaccination, usually such as soreness or swelling, redness at the injection site, malaise, which is fatigue, headache, body ache. And these are very mild symptoms, and they should go away in a matter of a few days. And we see the same thing with other vaccinations. So I don't think there's anything different regarding COVID-19 vaccination in that regard.
Thank you so much. And then Karina Brown, we've got a question for you, referring to something that you said earlier in this chat. It was asked, would you be able to give the name of some of those Black doctors involved in the clinical trials? Because she believes that a lot of the misinformation in the Black community comes from getting information from sources that are not credible.
Yeah, absolutely. The best, well, there's a lot of good ones out there, but one that really struck with me was Dr. Valerie Fitzhugh. She's a physician at Rutgers. I kind of saw that question, so I tried to find, it was a long time ago, but there's a really good article if you just kind of Google her name, Valerie Fitzhugh. She shares why she joined the clinical trial and her journey through the actual trial. So she talks about both doses she received, that she didn't know if she was getting the placebo or not. I think that's a really, really great one. There's also a Dr. Tyson Bell. It's spelled Taison, pronounced Tyson Bell. He's another physician that's on the front lines that has not really been involved in any clinical trials, but has done a lot of work at the forefront. And another physician, I think her name is Ebony Hilton. She's another physician that is on the front lines as well. But I would say Dr. Valerie Fitzhugh, she has one of the, I think, most robust and really good stories that also is able to be explained in a way that makes sense for people who do not work in healthcare, because I think that that's half the battle. Is healthcare is a foreign language if you are not in it. So when you're reading some of those research articles, it's hard to understand because they're speaking they're speaking physician to physician or nurse to nurse or clinician to clinician. So Dr. Valerie Fitzhugh really breaks it down and explains it in a way that's palatable. She's a mom, she's a doctor, she's Black. She really understands, she understands the ins and outs, and she was literally one of the first trials, which is pretty awesome to be a part of that history.
Thank you so much.
I have a short comment about the myocarditis and the concern of some people about if you get the vaccination, then there is a risk of inflammation of the muscle, the cardiac muscle. And this is what we call myocarditis. Actually, we see much more cases of myocarditis and cardiomyopathy, which is the cardiac muscle injury from the virus itself, compared to what we see, which is very rare side effects if you get the vaccination. So we, especially with the Delta variant, we saw a lot of myocarditis, which is a viral-induced muscle injury, cardiac muscle injury. And this is not something specific to the coronavirus or COVID-19. We see it with other viruses, such as the influenza. Many times we see what we call viral-induced myocarditis or cardiomyopathy. And the numbers by getting the virus is much way more than getting the vaccination itself. Actually, it's very rare to have myocarditis related to the vaccination.
May I say that in Spanish? Because I think that might be really important for... Lo que acaba de decir el doctor es que el riesgo de recibir la vacuna y tener una inflamación del corazón que mencioné anteriormente, eso es extremadamente raro. Y es más común a tener esa inflamación del corazón con el mismo virus, la infección con el virus, que con una vacuna. Y ese tipo de inflamación se puede ver con otros tipos de virus también, no es solamente con el COVID-19 que se ve esa inflamación. Entonces, es mucho más común tener esa inflamación si uno capta la infección y tiene el COVID-19 que con una vacuna.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're getting a couple of questions now asking about some data that shows a clear risk-benefit analysis stratified by age and comorbidities. There's some different varying data out there that this person is finding, particularly in young boys, that shows a negative benefit efficacy. Perhaps there could be a link that one of you could offer, or we can put on our website. One of the comments says the WHO does not recommend a COVID-19 vaccine for children, even though the CDC and the FDA do. Do you have any knowledge about any of that, any of you? Perhaps we'll follow up with some links that show data that back up some of the comments that our doctors are providing. Additionally, there were some questions similar to that about the things that you were just talking about, Dr. Eric Soucy. So perhaps that already provided an answer beforehand. So we'll look and try and add some links following this webinar that we'll post it on our website at ccchoir.org/health and safety. I wanted to talk a little bit about the help in the community. The vaccine, we've talked a lot about how it might help people stay safe themselves, but we hear a lot about by getting the vaccine, it assists the community and it's doing our part to help the community. Can someone explain what that means and how it helps the community for one person to get the vaccine? Maybe Karina?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. And I'm sure some of my colleagues will chime in. We live, right? We live in this world. We go to the grocery store, we go to libraries, we would like to go to concerts, people travel. And, you know, what we do know is that we can spread this disease. And so a lot of times we talk about, you know, how getting the vaccine can help prevent you from getting sick. I like to think about it kind of like the flu or a cold. You know, if you can get the flu vaccine to prevent you from potentially getting the flu, then when you go visit your grandparent or when you go to a friend's house, you're less likely to get them sick. Because let's say you were to get your friend sick and then your friend was going to go see their grandparent in a nursing home to visit and they got them sick with the flu. It kind of works the same with this vaccine. And everywhere you go in life, you leave a footprint, whether it's a footprint genetically or a footprint via memory. And so when you travel and you meet different people or you go around town, you're always kind of spreading something. And so it's important to know that, you know, you make an impact and you cause a ripple in the community with who you interact with. And it does have, you know, every kind of action has an equal and opposite reaction, right? Or a consequence. And we've gotten to a point with this, you know, disease with this virus that at my hospital, we had to cancel surgeries because we didn't have enough room to care for patients who had COVID. The majority of these patients were people who were unvaccinated. And so it has an effect because, now we're having to cancel surgeries for people who need medical care and attention. It's not an emergent surgery per se, and it's not, a life or death surgery in the moment, but they still need these routine surgeries and procedures to keep themselves well and healthy. So now we have to make a decision to delay those surgeries so that we can care for people who are more sick than the people who need these surgeries, but that can have a longer lasting effect. For example, we had to cancel a lot of procedures during the initial lockdown for people who had maybe had a mass on a scan that might have potentially been a cancer. Well, they couldn't come to the hospital to get more imaging or to get that mass tested to see if it was cancer because they were in lockdown or because we didn't have enough room and had to move their appointment to get that procedure. And now a year later, they've come to the hospital and they have cancer all over their body because they didn't get to come to the doctor and they didn't get to get that procedure done because we were caring for someone who needed the care at that time. So we've had to make some really hard decisions in the hospital with who we're going to see and who we're not going to see and who can wait because we have to take care of people. So, and this is potentially a patient who got COVID from a nursing home outbreak because a visitor came in and brought COVID and maybe didn't know they had it, or they did have it, but they wanted to see their loved one. That's the impact that it has. That's the impact that it can affect. I can give it to someone who can give it to their friend's grandparent. And, it's kind of crazy to think that far, but that's how really big it can get. So we're still really balancing that at the hospital now where we're caring for these COVID patients and we have another surge of COVID patients, but we're still trying to see people who have not been seen for a long time and who now are having some life-threatening illnesses because they have had to wait so long to get care and get seen. And it's sad, it's really heartbreaking, and we're trying to balance both. So it makes an impact.
Would you like for me to say that in Spanish? Lo que acaba de decir la enfermera Brown es que esto definitivamente puede impactar la comunidad. Entonces, cada vez que uno anda, por a donde uno vaya a andar, puede uno transmitir esta infección y esta infección se puede transmitir a una persona, a la próxima persona, donde que vaya a tener una situación, una infección muy severa. Por ejemplo, vamos a decir, yo salgo y estoy en contacto con alguien que vive con su abuela y se la pasa a la abuela y la abuela es más anciana y entonces ella tiene más riesgo de tener una infección más severa. Lo que ella ha visto en el hospital, a donde ella trabaja, es que las personas que han necesitado cuidado en el hospital, vamos a decir una biopsia de un tumor, esos tipos de citas se han tenido que ser canceladas porque no hay cupo, no hay manera de atender a todo mundo, se tiene que atender a las personas más enfermas. Y ahorita han sido las personas que tienen el COVID, que han tenido mucha enfermedad. Y entonces vamos a decir, esa persona no se pudo hacer la biopsia, pero ahora por fin, un año después, se hizo la biopsia, pero ahora ya el cáncer que tuvieron se ha regado por todo el cuerpo. Y entonces así es como podemos impactar esa situación, porque no podemos transmitir esta infección, se puede regar a otra persona y puede impactar los servicios que uno recibe en el hospital. Y tenemos que balancear, ahora tenemos que escoger a cuáles son los pacientes que podemos atender, porque no podemos atender a todo mundo y eso es algo que es muy serio por parte del corazón, 100%, y tenemos que tener estas conversaciones con la comunidad para que entiendan todo el mundo que esto es un gran impacto.
Thank you. And I know a lot of questions have come in about the vaccinated people also can get COVID. So there's some questions that I've gotten about is there scientific proof that unvaccinated people are more contagious than the vaccinated people? And why is that if they both have it? Are they contagious for a longer period of time? Comparatively, how does that work as far as being contagious?
So there's data show that if you're vaccinated, still you may get the virus. However, likely you'll have either be asymptomatic or very mild symptoms, and you'll be the period that the patient or the person will be contagious is a shorter period. And the rationale, you already, when you get the vaccination, so your body already created antibodies. So when you get infected with the coronavirus, the antibodies will bind to the spike proteins around the coronavirus, and that will inhibit the virus from entering the cells. So they will die out. That's why you have less symptoms, and that's why they will be less contagious. So there's a lot of studies and data out there prove that, and we see it. In general, if we get somebody in the hospital and they're vaccinated, we on many times where they get retested, their PCR testing on the rapid molecular testing are negative in a matter of a few days. We see that, and there's data out there that support that. I hope this has answered the question.
Lo que acaba de explicar el doctor es que entonces las personas que... La pregunta es si ser vacunado o no ser vacunado, ¿cómo de contagioso es la persona? Si la persona que no es vacunada es más contagiosa y por más tiempo. Y sí, se ha visto que la persona que no ha recibido la vacuna sí es más contagiosa y por más tiempo. Y eso es porque cuando uno se vacuna, lo que está ocurriendo es que el sistema inmunológico está creando anticuerpos. Y esos anticuerpos se van a pegar al virus y no van a dejar que el virus entre a la célula. El virus se tiene que crece cuando entra a la célula, entonces el virus se muere y por eso uno tiene menos síntomas, ¿ya? Entonces también se ha visto que las personas que son vacunados, si se hacen la prueba rápida, esa prueba rápida dentro de unos días ya van a ser negativa porque el cuerpo está programado para combatir ese virus. Entonces la cantidad de virus que uno tiene se va a bajar mucho más rápido que una persona que no es vacunado. Entonces sí se ha visto ese cambio, esa diferencia.
I think this question in the chat may go along with that, or maybe has been covered through some of your answers just now. Somebody asked why people who get vaccinated in the booster still get COVID. How come the vaccine isn't protecting them from getting COVID? So go ahead.
This is like, I think you're asking about the booster, and is it, so I believe booster shots are needed. Now, how often is not clear yet. We know now from that the first booster is needed after 5 to 6 months from the initial vaccination. And the boosters are needed because antibody levels from the vaccines tend to wane after several months. Now, it's still, I think, still too early to tell, but COVID-19 booster shot could become an annual actual requirement to protect against new variants. And same thing, similar to the influenza vaccination. That's why we get flu shots every year, because there's mutations, there's different variants. And I believe this is gonna be the same thing for coronavirus, that we're gonna have a yearly vaccination. As a matter of fact, many pharmaceutical, many companies are already working on combination vaccine for the flu and COVID-19. But to answer, the booster is needed because you get the vaccination, your body creates the antibodies, and then with time, the level of antibodies wears down, and that's why you need the booster in a matter of 6 months or a year. It's just we need time to tell how often we have to take the booster.
So just to piggyback on that, to the question of why if people that are vaccinated are still catching it, to Dr. Eric Susie's point, your immune system, your antibody response when you first get vaccinated is to a certain degree. And as he said, it goes down over time. So as it goes down, during that time that it's going down, that's when you can catch the infection again, okay? And to his point, that's why you need another booster. So I was just going to say, en español, lo que dijo el doctor es que la vacuna, lo que se piensa es de que la vacuna se va a tener que necesitar otra vez. Y se va a necesitar otra vez, quién sabe, no estamos seguros, quizás cada año, pero definitivamente quizás cada 4 o 5 meses, porque se está viendo que los anticuerpos se bajan ese tiempo, entre 4 a 5 meses. Y entonces esas vacunas que necesitamos, es muy posible que vamos a necesitar una cada año. Asimismo como necesitamos la vacuna contra la influenza, porque estos virus cambian. Y porque cambian, se necesita una nueva vacuna cada año para la protección. Y hay compañías que hasta están creando una combinación de vacuna con COVID-19 y la influenza para dar una vacuna para las dos viruses a la misma vez.
Thank you. And I know we spoke about different variants, and one of our attendees asked about talking about those different variants of COVID-19, the Delta variant. Now we are dealing with this Omicron surge. How does that all happen, and should we anticipate many more coming and different symptoms for each of them? Any comment on the variants?
Yeah, it's so so we need to coronavirus. It's we call it RNA virus, similar to the influenza, and it's a natural. The RNA viruses mutate over time. All of them do. So they keep changing every year. And again, that's why we recommend getting influenza vaccination every year. And that will be applied for the coronavirus. Now, as long the coronavirus spread through the community or through the population, the mutations will continue to happen. So really our role is to stop the spreading of the virus to prevent further mutations. So if the question, this is going to keep happening, well, if we don't do what we have to do, if we don't get vaccinated, if we're not wearing masks and the virus keep spreading, there's more mutations to come. This is how we end up with the Delta, and this is how we end up now with the Omicron, and it's going to continue to happen as long as there is a spread. But if you control the spread, then less mutations. But it's a natural history, is a natural way of the RNA viruses, all the viruses, including the not just COVID-19, the other coronaviruses and the influenza, they are RNA viruses and they mutate.
A lo que acaba de decir el doctor es que el virus, el COVID-19 virus es muy similar al virus de la influenza. Son viruses que se llaman RNA viruses. Esos viruses siempre están cambiando, cambian regularmente, cambian cada año. Por eso se recomienda la vacuna contra la gripa, la influenza cada año, porque cambian. Y entonces, mientras que se siga pasando este virus entre la comunidad, se sigue regando este virus entre la comunidad, va a tener la oportunidad de cambiar, va a tener la oportunidad de mutar, como se dice, cambiar. Y entonces, si no vacunados, si no estamos usando las máscaras para prevenir que se riegue el virus entre la comunidad, el virus siempre va a tener la oportunidad de crecer y cambiar. Entonces, por eso es importante conocer eso. Mientras que se siga regando, si vamos a tener esta historia, la pregunta que si vamos a seguir viendo diferentes, la Delta, el Omicron, sí, vamos a seguir viendo esto mientras que el virus se sigue regando y sigue cambiando.
Now, the good news, so the viruses, they want to survive and they mutate. And to survive, they became less mortal because if they kill their host, that will stop the spreading. So with time, over the years, the virus will become weaker and weaker to survive. And that's why we're seeing now with the Omicron. If you get Omicron, most likely you end up with less severe illness. And usually it's a laryngitis, inflammation in the upper airways, less likely to end up with lower respiratory infection. And it's just because it's mutating to survive. And that's why we see it over the history with different viruses, outbreaks.
Dice el doctor es que la buena noticia es que este virus quiere sobrevivir y entonces no quiere matar a la persona en que está viviendo, quiere vivir. Entonces, con el tiempo lo que se ve es que los virus son más transmitibles, pero menos peligrosos. Ahora, eso es lo que se ve. Y eso es lo que se ha visto históricamente, que los virus son menos severos, okay? Se ponen menos severos con el tiempo. Eso se ve históricamente. Como inicialmente empezó dando más infección en los pulmones, por ejemplo, severo, este nuevo variante da más infección de la garganta, por ejemplo, laringitis. Esa es la buena noticia, que sí quiere vivir este virus y la manera que lo va a hacer es seguir mutando para ponerse menos severo con el tiempo. May I add a little caveat to that, though?
Please.
But even with that, though, for people that are unvaccinated, this milder variant, the Omicron variant, it still is causing very severe disease for those people. And those are the people who are unvaccinated. If they catch Omicron, they can still end up hospitalized and needing intubation and unfortunately even dying and also getting those lung diseases as well. So we see that the variant is milder, but we really see that more for people that are vaccinated, that are unvaccinated. Just want to make that clear too, as well. Y lo que quería decirle en español es que le acabo de decir que el variante es menos severo, pero esos casos menos severos se están viendo más en pacientes que son vacunados que personas que no son vacunados. Las personas que no tienen la vacuna, todavía este mismo variante puede causar enfermedad muy severa. Uno puede andar en el hospital, intubado, con inflamación de los pulmones y hasta la muerte con este nuevo variante.
Thank you. And I think that there's a question in the chat that's been answered through that. It's basically you can't control getting COVID still, even if you're vaccinated, but the severity of the infection will be much less, it sounds like, is what you have already said. So I'm going to ask, if you do already have COVID, if someone already had COVID, are they immune and do they still need to get vaccinated and why?
Yes. So getting infected with the coronavirus is going to give you some immunity. How long is going to last? Initially, we thought it's up to 3 months, 90 days. But what we found that the level of antibodies after the vaccination is way higher than the amount of antibodies that you'll create after getting infected. So being vaccinated is going to provide much higher immunity compared to just being infected. By being infected and then get vaccinated, even better, is going to give you even much higher immunity to prevent from a secondary infection. Because now your body's going to mount much higher antibodies that's going to protect you for a longer period of time.
Ya, lo que acaba de explicar el doctor es que después de una infección, si el sistema inmunológico crea anticuerpos, uno sí tiene un nivel de protección, y se pensaba que esa protección duraba como unos 3 meses, pero esa protección, lo que se vio es que después de una vacuna, los anticuerpos que uno crea son mucho más altos que los anticuerpos que se crean después de una infección natural. Ahora, la persona que se ha sido infectada y después se vacuna también, entonces va a ser hasta más protección, porque han creado anticuerpos contra la infección natural y también contra la vacuna.
Thank you.
Con la vacuna.
So we're getting pretty close to 7 o'clock, and there are some questions still in the chat, but many are asking for specific data links, which we will try to add some to our website to verify some of the conversation here. So I appreciate it. I would love for each of you just to be able to share any final thoughts or comments or anything that you think that we didn't cover that you would love for the families to hear. Ms. Brown?
Yeah.
And it might have been related to something else, but please.
It kind of was along these lines, because I think kind of one of the things that I was going to say is the importance of strong articles that are cited by people who are qualified, doing the research and getting the information to you, which is hard to do with the internet. It's very hard to do, but it's important to know that the information that you're getting are from people who are the experts, because the real experts who are doing the work and are doing the boots on the ground research are not going to lie to you, because none of us got into healthcare to tell you false information. They might tell you things that you don't want to hear, but they're not going to tell you information that is false. So while some people were talking, I was kind of poking into the chat, and I was looking up some of the articles that people had dropped in the chat, kind of asking questions. And what I noticed about a lot of those articles is the websites are not, they're not hospital websites. They're not universities that are doing the research. So it's important to really look at, some people like the CDC, some people don't want to go to the CDC. Well, you can go to johnhopkinsuniversity.org. You can go to northwesternuniversity.edu or Northwestern Hospital. You can Google top 10 hospitals in the country, and then you can look up those hospitals, because every hospital has a COVID-19 page, and that's going to have information where you can kind of see what's going on and see if that's helpful for you, or understand more research. I'm sure Children's Hospital here has a whole COVID-19 page. I don't care for children, so I can't really speak to that too much, but I know that they have a COVID-19 link on their website, and that's going to give you information. And then they're pulling in articles as well too. Many hospitals are doing this. It's important to read information from credible cited sources. So I just wanted to plug that. And I think, if you're hesitant to get the vaccine, ask yourself, why haven't you done it yet? And what's the real reason that you haven't done it? And if it's, I heard, and you have a doctor, go to your doctor and ask those questions, or, look on the internet for those, cited articles that are going to answer those questions, because at the end of the day, it's you and it's your family that you have. And what can you do to keep them safe, and what can you do to keep yourself safe? For all of us, the answer was getting the vaccine, because we have seen the devastation. I have held the hands of people who have not survived, and their family members couldn't do that because they couldn't come to the hospital because we couldn't let them get COVID. So, it's a very real virus. It's very scary, and it has just devastated a lot of families, and it's really put a damper on healthcare, and it's made it hard for us to really, see the positives some days, because we see so much death and destruction from this disease. And what we know is that it's going to mutate and it's going to change until we can contain it. And, you know, no one ever said that vaccines are 100% effective in preventing you from getting sick. No one's ever said that, but it does give you a very, very strong chance of keeping yourself well and being less likely to get other people sick. And sometimes that's the bottom line that you need to make your decision. That's what it was for me and doing the research. So thank you for having me. I'm always happy to come back and answer any questions, and I hope that everyone stays safe and healthy and that you wear your mask.
Lo que acaba de explicar la enfermera Brown es que mucha de la información que estamos recibiendo es información, artículos que no necesariamente son de expertos y de hospitales. Entonces, siempre cuando uno está leyendo algo es bueno revisar quién escribió este artículo, qué experiencia tienen, cuáles son los entrenamientos que ha pasado esa persona para poder hablar de esta situación claramente y con evidencia. Y entonces es difícil, ¿verdad? Es difícil hacer eso porque hay tanta información en el internet y entonces uno puede tener mucha confusión, pero en esas situaciones, si uno tiene un doctor, vaya a su doctor para que le pueda explicar bien cuál es la información que es bien creable, que es información de evidencia y no opinión o por una persona que tiene una diferente agenda. Por ejemplo, a ninguno de nosotros que entramos en la medicina lo hicimos para tratar de darles una mentira o decirle cosas que no son reales. Siempre le vamos a decir las cosas que son seguras porque queremos proteger al público. La otra cosa que se estuvo explicando ella es que en realidad es algo tan trágico, ¿verdad? Porque ella ha visto en el hospital las personas que han fallecido de esta situación y los familiares no han podido ir ni a visitar a esas personas porque no se puede contagiar la familia con el COVID-19. So, la tragedia de estar una persona en el hospital solo, sin su familia, ha sido algo tan impactante y tan horrible en realidad. So, entonces, hagan lo que puedan hacer para leer información que viene de expertos, de personas que en realidad han tenido entrenamiento para saber la ciencia y la evidencia, y usen una máscara. Gracias.
Thank you so much. Dr. Eric Susi, any final comments that you wanted to share?
Yes, just I want to make sure that the public is aware about the current scene in the hospitals. People getting to the triage before getting to the emergency room, waiting for hours to be seen by an ER doctor. Then in the emergency room, patients are in the hallways because all the rooms are occupied. Patients in need for critical care, and there's no ICU bed, and they're cardiac arresting and dying in the emergency room. Hospital beds are filled with COVID patients. The ICU, 95 to 98% occupied by COVID patients. Vented, intubated, prone, sedated, paralyzed. A lot of cardiac arrests every day. I saw my day-to-day at 3:30 in the morning. Started with a cardiac arrest in the medical floor, and then another 2 deaths in the ICUs. This is the scene every day over the last few weeks. It's been devastating, and we're doing everything possible in our hands. So I want the public to do their due diligence, and even if you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, please wear masks. And God forbid, if you end up with a virus and you end up hospitalization, we'll do everything in our hands to help you get through it. What we're dealing with right now is much worse than early on in the pandemic back in March, April, May last year, 2020. We are tired, the staff tired. We're losing a lot of nurses and staffing because they're overwhelmed. It's been 2 years and still more days to come.
Lo que acaba de explicar del doctor es lo que quiere él decirle al público es que la situación está muy difícil. Lo que él ha visto es pacientes entrando a la sala de emergencia teniendo que esperar horas en la sala de emergencia necesitando cuidado crítico y muriéndose en la sala de emergencia de ataques cardíacos, por ejemplo, porque el hospital está lleno, porque no hay una cama para ese paciente. Se ve que 95 a 98% de los pacientes están ocupando en la sala intensiva tienen COVID-19. Se está viendo una situación a donde pacientes no se pueden atender porque el hospital está llenísimo y esto es una cosa devastadora. En realidad están todos trabajando en el hospital, están cansados, agotados. Se ven pacientes que están intubados, paralizados, pacientes que en realidad hasta esta mañana, a las 3:30 de la mañana, la primer paciente que vio el doctor fue un paciente que murió de un ataque de corazón. Y entonces, esta es una situación muy devastadora. Y eso es lo que quiere decirles, que ahorita la situación está peor, en el hospital está peor que como estaba en marzo del 2020.
Thank you, and thank you, Dr. Urksusi. And Dr. Oyola, any final comments from you? And we thank you all for your time and staying over an hour here to talk about this. There's obviously a lot of questions.
Of course, no, it's been our pleasure, I know, to be here with you and to really share our experiences and also our knowledge about this. And what I'll say as a family medicine doctor, I have spent many hours with patients who contracted COVID-19 and now are dealing with the long-term consequences of COVID-19. We're talking about headaches and muscle aches that have lingered for weeks to months to a year. People that have not been able to go back to work or engage in any normal activities day to day because they're in so much pain after this infection. People that have developed worsening of their respiratory conditions, especially asthma, who now need to be on different medications to maintain and manage asthma, depression, anxiety. A high rate of depression and anxiety from having developed this disease, been hospitalized for this disease. To be hospitalized and to be intubated and survive that is incredibly traumatizing. So people that are now have been discharged and home, left with the trauma of that experience and the long-term mental health disorders and consequences that I've seen from this infection, and it's been heartbreaking to hear about. I just talked to a patient of mine this week who's both her father and her mother died of COVID, and they were unvaccinated, and it was heartbreaking to hear about the loss of that family and how that family is will never be the same, because of that devastation and the anxiety and the depression that's developed after she lost her mom and her dad. And I just wanted to just say, please, as much as you can, find the most credible sources that you can to get the information that you need in order to get clarity and make your decision based on really valid and well-tested, credible information. Please, I know there's a lot of information out there and it's hard to tease all of this apart. Some articles you might read from the New York Times and it sounds perfectly legitimate. But then if you read really closely, the people that are cited are sales representatives from some company that's trying to sell you the machine that they say that will prevent COVID. So just really be just aware that there's just a lot of information out there, and we're here to help you as much as possible, not judge you, not blame you, not shame you. We're not here about blame or shame or judgment. We're going to be here to take care of people no matter what you decide. But we want to make sure that you are as safe as possible. And the way to get to that safety is to really to have the most clarity and the most clear and accurate information possible to be safe. But please don't feel that we're here saying, you're blamed or you're judged, or that's the last thing that a medical professional wants you to feel. We want you to feel heard and validated. We're here to have a conversation with you about your concerns so we can get to some clarity about it. That's really what we're here to do. We're not here to try to convince you. We're trying to help you get closer to some understanding of what is the evidence to keep you as safe as possible. Lo que le acabo de explicar es que en realidad yo he visto algo tan devastadora entre ser de doctora de medicina familiar desde el principio, y lo que he visto es pacientes que han tenido consecuencias muy largas después de esta infección, consecuencias como dolores crónicos del cuerpo, de la cabeza, que no han podido regresar a trabajar, que no han podido regresar a sus actividades regulares y normales. Condiciones como depresión y ansiedad, porque cuando uno es hospitalizado e intubado, eso es una situación muy traumatizante. Y esta trauma, cuando las personas salen del hospital, se pueden quedar con mucha ansiedad y mucha depresión. Y entonces yo he visto las consecuencias de esa infección crónicas que han causado mucho daño en el individuo. Acabo de hablar con un paciente esta semana que su mamá y su papá, los dos se murieron del COVID. Y desafortunadamente no estaban vacunados. Y cómo esa situación ha cambiado esa familia por toda su vida, toda la vida. Y la depresión y la ansiedad de lo que siente esa persona ahora por no tener a su padre y su madre. También lo que les puedo decir es que aquí lo que estamos tratando de hacer como profesionales médicos en realidad es ayudarlos a entender la información. Hay mucha información y puede ser información muy confusa. Uno lee un artículo y se ve súper real y súper legítimo, pero en realidad las personas que están escribiendo estos artículos quizás son personas que trabajan para compañías que están tratando de venderles la máquina que dicen que puede prevenir el COVID. Entonces, hay mucha manipulación de información y lo que estamos tratando de hacer nosotros es aclarar la información. No lo queremos juzgar, no los queremos culpar, no los queremos hacer sentir vergüenza. En realidad estamos aquí como profesionales a ayudarles a llegar a la claridad, porque al llegar a la claridad entonces va a llegar a la seguridad. ¿Ya? Y ese es el propósito de un profesional médico. Por favor, traten de hablar con expertos y personas que entienden esta información para más claridad y para tenerlo seguro.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's very late and we appreciate all the work, not only all of your expertise that you've shared with us tonight, but all the work that you're doing every day to keep our community safe and healthy and alive. We really appreciate it. Thank you everyone for attending tonight. And thank you so much for our medical experts. We really appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.